Trump just delivered Gavin Newsom the single worst day of his entire political career. The sound was heavy, flat, and final. 400 pages struck the hardwood floor of the East Room in the White House. No one moved to pick them up. Gavin Newsom sat above them with empty hands. Donald Trump sat at the far end of the table with his own copy open, pages folded and underlined. He did not say a word. To understand how that report ended up on the floor, you have to go back roughly 90 minutes to the moment Trump leaned into his microphone and asked a question so simple it almost sounded polite. Governor, in the 7 years you've been running California, how much federal money came into your state? Newsom leaned into the microphone the way a man leans into a wind he has walked through before. Mr. President, California and the federal government have always been partners. We are the largest state economy in America, the fifth largest economy in the world, and during an unprecedented series of crises, every state drew heavily on federal resources. California was no different. Smooth, practiced. A sentence he had given 500 times on 500 stages. And it landed the way it always landed, which was on nothing at all. Trump did not react to the answer. He reached down and opened the report to the first red tab. Your unemployment system, he said. During COVID, your state paid out $20 billion in fraudulent claims. Not improper, fraudulent, stolen, $20 billion. He ran a finger down the page. On top of that, $55 billion in what auditors call improper payments. And you know how many people your state had checking for fraud? Two employees for 40 million people. He looked up. Death row inmates got unemployment checks, Governor. Men sitting in prison on death row got checks from your state. Somebody filed a claim under the name Dianne Feinstein, a United States senator, got paid. Somebody filed under the name Mr. Poopy Pants. He let that sit for 1 full second, got paid. A reporter near the back let out a sound that was almost a laugh and then caught it because the number underneath the absurdity was not funny at all. Newsom pivoted. It was reflex. Every state in this country faced pandemic fraud. This was a federal program designed under federal guidelines, and the speed of disbursement was mandated by the previous administration. To single out California is to ignore the national scope of this. Governor, Trump did not raise his voice. He just cut through. You have been governor for 7 years. 7. At what point does everything stop being somebody else's fault? The sentence sat on the table between them, and Newsom did not pick it up. He tried a different angle. A recovery. We have recovered $5.9 billion in stolen funds. We hired a fraud special counsel. We took aggressive action the moment the scope of the problem became clear. Trump nodded slowly. $5.9 billion out of $55 billion. That is 11 cents on the dollar, Governor. He let the math do the work. I have seen better collection rates from a lemonade stand. A sound moved through the gallery, not quite a laugh, something between a laugh and a wince. The kind of sound people make when a number is so bad it stops being a number and becomes a verdict. If you have ever seen a politician try to spin his way out of 11 cents on the dollar, hit that like button, because that was just the opening question, and this man has 6 more years of receipts to go through. Trump did not pause. Same tab, same pattern. Let's talk about who was spending the money. Your Chief of Staff, Dana Williamson. He read from the page. 23 federal charges. Conspiracy, bank fraud, wire fraud, false tax returns. He looked up over the report. And here's what she bought, Governor, while she worked for you in your office. A $15,000 Chanel handbag, a Fendi bag, $5,800, a private jet charter, $21,000, a birthday trip to Mexico, $170,000, one birthday, and $1.7 million in fake deductions on her taxes. He closed one finger on the page and opened another. And while she was doing all of that in your office, under your name, 181,000 people in your state were sleeping on the street. The transition was seamless. The money flowed in one sentence from Chanel to concrete, from a handbag to a tent. $24 billion, Trump said. That is what California spent on homelessness in 5 years. $24 billion. You want to know the result? Your homeless population went up, not down. up from 151,000 to 181,000, a 24% increase, $42,000 per homeless person per year. You could have rented each of them an apartment in any city in the country for that money. Instead, they are still in tents. He smoothed the page flat. And your state auditor says your own agency stopped tracking where the money went in 2021, just stopped. And when your legislature passed a bill requiring you to track it, you vetoed it. He looked up. You refused to let yourself be audited, Governor. That's not oversight. That's a tell. Trump looked directly into the center camera, not at Newsom, at the people watching. Every dollar that was stolen from the EDD, every dollar that went to Chanel bags and private jets, every dollar of that $24 billion that nobody can account for, that was your dollar. You went to work, you paid your taxes, you thought it was going to help somebody, it went into a handbag. Newsom's smile was thinner now. Still, their habit runs deep, but it had stopped reaching his eyes, and the room could see it, and so could every person watching at home. Death row inmates getting unemployment checks, a chief of staff buying Chanel with fraud money, $24 billion for homelessness, and more people on the streets. If that made your blood pressure rise, subscribe right now because that was just the money. Next comes the lies, and the lies are worse. Trump's voice shifted, lighter, almost amused. This was the part he had been waiting for, and you could hear it. Now, Governor, let's talk about the things you promised. He flipped to the yellow tab. Your first day in office, January 2019, you stood up in front of the cameras and declared war on wildfires. Big speech, lots of cameras. You signed an executive order, and then you told the public that your priority projects had treated 90,000 acres with fuel breaks and prescribed burns. 90,000. That is what you told the people of California. He ran his finger across the line. Cap Radio and NPR investigated. You know what the real number was? 11,399. You overstated your wildfire prevention work by 690%. He looked up. Then you cut $150 million from the Cal Fire prevention budget. Trump's voice dropped half a register, not amused now. 85 people died in Paradise, Governor. 85. The whole town burned, families, people who had lived there 40 years, and you told them you were protecting them. Newsom shifted in his chair. Climate change is the primary driver of wildfire in California. The federal government owns 57% of California's forests, and the failure to manage federal lands has been documented for decades. To reduce this to a single statistic is to miss the entire Governor. Trump's voice was flat. You said you treated 90,000 acres. You treated 11,000. That is not climate change. That is lying. The pivot had nowhere to land. It hung in the air for a moment and then fell quietly like a thing nobody wanted to hold. But you did not just lie about fires. Trump was almost smiling now. Let's talk about your train. He turned to the next tab. In 2008, the voters of California approved a high-speed rail line from Los Angeles to San Francisco, $33 billion, done by 2020. That is what they voted for. He spread one hand across the page. It is now 2026. The cost is somewhere between $126 billion and $231 billion, depending on which of your own agencies you ask. There are 0 trains, 0 miles of track laid, 0 passengers. 18 years, and the only thing your rail authority has built is a warehouse. He looked up with something close to wonder. I build buildings, Governor. I have built them in 14 countries. I know what things cost. $33 billion to $231 billion is not a cost overrun. That is a bank robbery that takes 18 years and nobody gets arrested. Newsom leaned forward. You pulled $4 billion in federal funding from that project for political purposes. You sabotaged California's infrastructure investment to score points with your base, and everyone in this room knows it. Trump did not miss a beat. We pulled the money because you could not account for the money we already gave you. 597 change orders on that project. $2.3 billion in contract amendments. You know something, Governor? I have built buildings in 14 countries. I have never had 597 change orders for all of them combined. The room broke. Not a polite laugh, a real one. the kind that moves through 200 people like a wune. Strangers looked at each other and laughed harder because someone else was laughing. By the time it reached the front of the room, it had a weight to it that nobody could call back. A woman in the second row took her glasses off and pressed the back of her hand to her eyes. A cameraman in the far corner shook his head slowly with a grin he could not have stopped if he tried. Newsom smiled along reflex. You smile when the room laughs. But the smile was thin and his eyes were not smiling, and every person watching at home recognized that exact expression because they had seen it on every politician who had ever lied to them. Newsom had taken enough. 2 rounds of evidence and the smooth machine that had carried him through a decade of cameras was running hot. He did not pivot this time. He attacked. He sat straight, pulled the microphone toward him, found the center camera, and came at Trump with everything he had left. And it was not nothing. You want to talk about numbers, Mr. President? Let's talk about numbers. California is the 5th largest economy in the world, not the country, the world. We power the technology industry, the entertainment industry, the agricultural backbone of this nation. And the people sitting at home watching this right now on their couches in Mississippi and Alabama and states that take more federal money than they put in, they think they understand how to run a $4 trillion economy. They do not. They have never had to make a single decision at that scale, and they never will. Give him this. The room shifted. A Newsom staffer behind him nodded hard. 2 reporters exchanged a look. The old reflex moved through the room like a current, the trained hesitation, the instinct to step back rather than challenge a man who speaks for the largest state in the union. It worked for about 15 seconds. It worked, Newsom continued, and I will say this because nobody in this room has the nerve to say it. His voice climbed. The people watching this program who think they could run California better because they read about it on Facebook, you are the reason we are having this conversation. Not because California failed, but because you want California to fail because it makes you feel better about your own state. He was not done. You want to talk about people leaving? People leave California because California is too successful. Housing costs are high because everyone wants to live there. That is supply and demand. That is economics that half this audience does not understand because they have never lived in a place where everybody wants to be. A Newsom aide in the back straightened up. She thought he was winning. She was wrong, but she thought it, and her face showed it, and for a moment the room teetered between 2 versions of what was happening. In living rooms across Louisiana and Texas and Ohio and the parts of Minnesota where nobody voted for Gavin Newsom, that last part landed like a second slap on top of the first. He had just told 40 million Americans that they were too stupid to understand him and too jealous to judge him fairly. He said it on camera, he said it on purpose, and he believed every word. He just called you stupid. He just said you want his state to fail because it makes you feel better about yours. If that lit something up inside you, share this video with one person right now, because what the president says next is the thing you have been waiting to hear someone say out loud. Trump did not flinch, did not fire back. He sat with his hands flat on the table and he waited not the way a man waits when he is thinking of what to say, the way a man waits when he already knows exactly what to say and is choosing the moment to say it. He let the insult travel. Let every person at home hear it, process it, and feel what they were going to feel. In those living rooms, in those recliners, in front of those big screens, something shifted that does not shift back. It is the moment when anger stops being hot and starts being cold, when it stops being about the argument and starts being about the person. When the silence was heavy enough, Trump spoke 2 words, calm. You finished, Governor? Newsom said nothing. And that nothing said everything. Trump reached down and opened the last tab, the blue one. His voice was lower now, slower. This was not the boardroom Trump or the amused Trump or the Trump who builds buildings in 14 countries. This was Trump when he is genuinely angry and holding it on a leash. Governor, you just told the American people they don't understand. Fine. Let me tell them something they do understand. He read slowly every detail. November 6th, 2020, the French Laundry restaurant, Napa Valley, $350 a person before the Wagyu beef supplement, 12 people at a birthday party for a lobbyist, the CEO of the California Medical Association sitting right next to you, no masks. Your office said it was outdoors. The photos showed it was indoors, behind glass doors that had to be closed because your table was too loud. He turned the page. That same week, Governor, the same week you sat at that table, you moved 94% of Californians into the purple tier, the most restrictive lockdown in the country. Restaurants closed. Owners who had spent 20 years building a business watched it die. Schools closed. Children sat in front of screens for 8 hours a day. Families were told they could not gather for Thanksgiving. 3 households or more banned. Trump looked at the camera, not at Newsom, at the people. And in every hospital in your state that same week, there was a mother, 78 years old, or a father, 82, dying alone, and their children, your children, stood in the parking lot, could not go in, could not hold their hand, could not say goodbye. Because of your order, he let one breath pass. A restaurant owner in Redondo Beach hung a sign outside his restaurant that said French Laundry. You know why? Because he wanted people to know that if it was good enough for the governor, his restaurant should be good enough for his customers. But it was not good enough because the rules were not for the governor. The rules were for him and for you. Trump looked back at the camera. And while they stood in that parking lot, while you stood in that parking lot, he sat at the French Laundry, shoulder to shoulder with lobbyists, laughing so loud they had to close the doors. The room went silent, not the silence of waiting, the silence of 200 people thinking about the same thing at the same time, the person they lost, the goodbye they never got. At home, across the country, in every living room where someone had buried a parent or a grandparent during those months, the same memory surfaced at the same moment. The parking lot, the phone call from the nurse, the drive home alone. Newsom's jaw was set. His hands were on the table, but they were not steady. For the first time in 90 minutes, he was not thinking about the camera. Trump stayed quiet for 3 seconds, then still low. And then you wonder why they leave. He turned to the last page. 10 million people left California since 2010. The state lost a congressional seat for the first time in its history. Los Angeles County lost 53,000 residents in a single year. Tesla left. Oracle left. Chevron left. Hewlett-Packard left. California used to be the place everyone wanted to get to. Everyone watching at home knows that because they remember it, the Golden State. Now look at it. His voice softened. And the families who cannot afford to leave, they are stuck. Their grandchildren grow up where? With electricity twice the national average, a median home at $874,000, and tent cities in front of the school. Newsom opened his mouth. Mr. President, the economy of California. But the sentence had no ending. The voice had no steel left in it. The engine underneath was sputtering. The room did not shift toward him. Nobody nodded. The insult he had thrown at the audience 10 minutes earlier had burned through whatever goodwill he had left. There was nothing to catch him. Trump quiet. You want to talk about the economy. You always want to talk about the economy. But the economy does not hold a dying person's hand. The economy does not stand in a parking lot. And the economy did not book a table for 12 at the French Laundry while the whole state was locked inside. There is a kind of silence that comes after all the evidence has been read that is not the silence of waiting for more. It is the silence of a room that has made up its mind. And Gavin Newsom heard it and knew what it meant and did not know what to do with it because he had never been inside this kind of silence before. One last question, Governor. Trump folded his hands. Simple. 7 years. More money than any governor in the history of this country. He held for one beat. Is California today better or worse than the day you took office? Newsom reached for the pivot, the machine that had saved him through the recall, through the DeSantis debate, through 6 fire seasons and a pandemic. If we're looking at the investments in clean energy and infrastructure, he stopped. He hurt himself. There was no infrastructure to point to. No train, no track. He knew, the room knew. What we need to focus on is the partnership between state and federal. He stopped again. Partnership. He had just called half the country stupid. There was no partnership to invoke. The American people understand, and here in the middle of the word, the machine quit. He had said 10 minutes ago on camera to their faces that the American people did not understand. The word died in his mouth because he could hear the echo of his own voice saying the opposite, and the echo was louder than anything he could say now. 3 seconds of silence. The longest 3 seconds of Gavin Newsom's political career. The red lights held steady. Nobody in the room helped him. Trump spoke, calm, almost gentle, the voice of a man closing a meeting that has gone on too long. They couldn't say goodbye, Governor. You ordered steak. Nobody laughed. The sentence did not produce laughter. It went deeper than laughter, into the place where grief meets rage, meets disgust, meets the thing that has no word for it except recognition. The recognition that the sentence was true, that it had always been true, and that somebody had finally said it out loud. Newsom looked down at the report in front of him. His copy still closed. 90 minutes, and he had not opened a single page. His hands were flat on the table. He pushed his chair back a half-inch, a small unconscious reflex, the body wanting to leave before the mind gave permission. And the edge of his hand caught the report, and it moved across the polished wood of the East Room table. 400 pages in a stiff binding, sliding slowly and then not slowly, and it went over the edge. The sound it made when it hit the floor was heavy and flat and final, the only sound in a room where 200 people were holding their breath. Nobody picked it up. Newsom looked down at where it fell. Then he looked up. Then he folded his hands in his lap and said nothing at all. There is a kind of collapse that makes no noise, no shouting, no slamming, no walking out. The kind where 400 pages of evidence lie on the floor under a man's feet, each page a promise he broke, a number he invented, a family he betrayed, and he does not bend down to pick them up because picking them up means opening them and he knows what is inside. That sound, 400 pages hitting the floor of the East Room in dead silence. If that gave you chills, turn on notifications right now because the cameras are about to go off and what happened after is the part that changes everything. Stay with me. By the time the feed cut, the clip already had a life of its own. Somebody pulled the 30 seconds clean, 3 pivots that died mid-sentence on live television, one after the other like an engine trying to turn over and failing each time. Below the clip, in every comment section on every platform, the same word appeared more than any other: receipts. In Fort Worth, Texas, a family that had left San Jose 2 years earlier watched in a living room twice the size of their old California apartment at half the rent. When Trump said the words, "California used to be the place everyone wanted to get to," the wife looked at her husband. She did not speak. She did not need to. They both knew why they were here, and they had both just heard the president say the reason out loud on national television. The husband nodded once slowly at the screen. In Paradise, California, a firefighter with 26 years on the job and 3 colleagues buried in 2018 watched from the station break room. When Trump read the number 690%, 90,000 acres on paper, 11,000 in the dirt, the firefighter stood up from his chair and walked outside. He stood in the parking lot in the cold air. He was not angry. He just needed air. He had known the number for years. He had just never heard anyone read it out loud to the face of the man who lied about it. In Sacramento, in a hallway of the state capitol, a Democratic legislator who did not want her name used spoke to a reporter in a low, fast voice, glancing both directions down the corridor before she said it. Everyone knew those numbers. Everyone. We just thought nobody would read them out loud on national television while he was sitting right there. She looked down the hallway again and added quickly, "He should not have said that thing about the audience. That line will follow him longer than any number." Newsom walked out of the East Room without stopping for reporters, eyes forward, steps quick. A reporter near the door called out, "Governor, is California better or worse?" He did not turn around. And on live television, that was the answer. Trump closed his copy of the report, picked it up off the table, stood. He walked the length of the room past the chair where Newsom had sat, past the place on the floor where Newsom's copy still lay face down and open where it had fallen. He did not pick it up. He did not look down. He walked out. The East Room emptied. The lights went down by halves. The report was still on the floor, open, white pages facing the ceiling. A janitor came in 20 minutes later to clear the water glasses and straighten the chairs. He saw the book on the floor and did not know what it was. He picked it up, closed it, and set it on a shelf beside a stack of folded napkins. And there it sat, every number, every broken promise, every family that could not say goodbye on a shelf nobody would look at, in a room that had gone dark, next to white napkins that would be laid on another table tomorrow morning for another meeting where someone else would promise something. If this story made you nod even once, hit that like button so the algorithm shows it to more people who remember what California used to be. If you believe the receipt should never stop being read out loud, subscribe to this channel right now. Share this with one person who left California or who lost someone during COVID and never got to say goodbye. Leave one word in the comments, receipts, because the smooth talk is over, the numbers do not pivot. And 400 pages are still on that floor.